We're in Daniel chapter 12. This chapter is a significant one, and we want to start off in Daniel chapter 12, at least reviewing again what we reviewed a little earlier. In the book of Revelation chapter 5, it told us that the Father had in his hand a scroll sealed with 7 seals. And no one was able to open the book, and John started to weep. He started to weep and cry over this situation. And we wanted to know, why is he weeping and crying? I mean, what's so important about this book? That, I mean, he's just weeping and crying. And we found out before that it's the book of Daniel. And because it's the book of Daniel, that's why he's weeping. Because he's saying, listen, how can the people of God go through the end of time without knowing what's going on? How can they even be prepared? They won't be ready. They'll be deceived and all caught up in what's going on and will miss out. So he cried, and he says, don't cry any longer. There is one from the line of the tribe of Judah, and his name is Jesus, and he can open the seal. So let's just look at chapter 12, verse 4 and verse 9 to just get started, and then we'll start at verse 1 and do as usual, cover the whole chapter. That's what we usually do, try to do chapter by chapter, as much as the chapter is possible. Okay, in verse 4 it says, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So we see here that Daniel will seal up the book until the time of the end comes. Not prior, not before the time of the end, but at the time of the end. Okay? Verse 9 says, and he said, go thy way, O Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. The words of Daniel chapter 12 are clearly sealed and closed up to the time of the end. I remember in Peter, Jesus lets us know that the path of the just shall what? Shine more and more to the perfect day. So as we move on in time, the scrolls will be unrolled. As the scrolls unroll, we will better understand what's going on. Okay? Now let's start off at verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. So we see here that the Bible is letting us know about the time of trouble. Okay? This time of trouble is at this time in history. The time of trouble is in the seals. Okay? And we looked through the seals before, and where does the time of trouble come in under the seals?
The fifth
So you guys should ask me. I'm going to ask a trick question.
State your question again.
I think I asked a trick question. Huh?
Between the 5th and 6th.
Between the 5th and 6th. That's correct. Great tribulation. Between the 5th and the 6th. Okay? Now, as we move on, let's find out what else happened. Now, notice it says, at that time shall thy people be delivered. Delivered from what? From tribulation. Okay? From the people hunting them down. From what? From tribulation, as our sister mentioned. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awaken. Okay? Some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Then the question is asked, well, is this the second coming of Christ? Well, then the question is asked, it says that some, when Jesus comes, who's going to be raised from the grave?
The righteous dead.
That's what it says in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. that he shall send forth his angels to gather what? Them from one end of heaven unto the other. So what do we do here with the verse that tells us clear that some will rise to everlasting life, which is clearly, we know who those are, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now it didn't say all. That's number one. That's a catchphrase. It didn't say all the righteous will be raised. It didn't say all the wicked will be raised. It says some of the righteous and some of the wicked. Well, let's look in Revelation chapter 1, verse 7. I think it might shed a little light on the situation for us.
Revelation what?
Chapter 1, verse 7. In Revelation 1, verse 7, it says, Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him. And they also which, what?
Pierced him.
Pierced him. And all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so. Amen. So he lets us know that those that pierced him will be what? Will see him. Okay? So now we can see that this at least identifies some of the wicked who will be raised. This is not his second coming. This is before his second coming. But it lets us know that when he comes, that what's going to happen? That some of the wicked who pierced him are clearly going to see him. Also, that's found in John 5:29 in the Gospel, where Jesus gave the Sanhedrin, I guess, the promise. I think I might be off on that. I know I'm off on that because that's not it. But let's see what it says here in Matthew 5:29. And shall come forth, okay, verse 28, marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in the which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice. And shall come forth they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. So we know that there are two resurrections, okay? We also know in Revelation chapter 21, let's look at that for a minute. No, Revelation chapter 20, sorry. In Revelation chapter 20, it lets us know in verse 5. I'll start at verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which have not worshipped the beast. So this is last day events. And worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither have received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again till 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So he lets us know that there is going to be a first resurrection. And we know that that first resurrection obviously is when he comes in the clouds and he raises the righteous dead. But what does it say? Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Okay? So we see here that we have a first resurrection, and we have here that there's something that talks about a second death. Okay? Which lets us know that if we are raised in the first resurrection, we're not going to have part in the second death. Let's also look at Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. Because we want to just be able to clearly identify these two groups of people rising at the same time. Some wicked and some righteous. That's what we're trying to identify here. Okay? Because usually when we look at Thessalonians and the other places, it just says that he's going to raise the righteous, not the wicked. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So again we see here that those that pierced him shall what? Shall see him. Okay? So I just wanted us to realize that. So this does not have to just mean the first resurrection of the righteous people. Okay? In Daniel chapter 12. Right around that time when he raises some of the people, he's raising some of the wicked so that they might be able to see him when he comes in the clouds of glory, so that those who he promised, the Sanhedrin and whoever else was there, that they might be able to see him. Okay, let's move on. And this is all dealing with last day events. This is, last day events, the last of the end of the end. You know what I mean? This is clearly, we're living in the end time, but we're not even talking about the beginning of the end time. We're talking about the end of the end time. Right? Around the trumpets and beginning of the plagues, the time of trouble. That's what we're talking about. Okay? As a matter of fact, I even think that when he raised them from the dead, this is even after the plagues. So we're at the annals of time at that point. Okay? When we're reading here. When he raises them from the dead. It's not going to be for years and all this time that they're going to be raised and they're going to be walking around. That's not the purpose for that. Okay, verse 3. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. I thought that was interesting, because it makes mention here that they that are righteous and those that are following the Lord, that they're going to shine. Now, who else shined before?
Moses.
Moses shined, because what? He had received much of the Holy Spirit and his face shone. Anyone else?
Possibly Stephen.
Stephen, it says that his face is the face of an angel. Okay? So in the last days, when we give the last message to a dying world, I believe that when we turn many to righteousness, that literally we might be lighted up. We're going to be, because those that are perfected, the 144,000, they will have the indwelling of Christ. And if you read that, so that's a point I wanted us to mention, that we will shine, just as they did of old. Because don't forget, this is going to be a special group of people, a group that has never been perfected before in Earth's history, that go forth to give the last message to a dying world, and no one will be able to challenge them on what the Word says, because God will speak directly through them. They will be a channel that has to be holy, such that the indwelling of God can dwell in them and speak to them. That's going to be a special group of people. Same thing with John the Baptist. I believe that they are nothing but a representation of a John the Baptist in the last days. And we know that the Bible tells us that in Malachi, let's turn there for a minute, because the scripture has to still be fulfilled. In Malachi chapter 4, verse 5, it says, Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Now notice, it says before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Now John the Baptist was also called an Elijah, but guess what? Was it before the great and dreadful day of the Lord? No. It was at the time of him coming as a lamb, not coming as a lion of the tribe of Judah. Okay, he didn't come at that time to judge the people. I remember he mentions that to his disciples, that he didn't come for that now. It's not the time for that. But there will be a time for that. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. And so we see here that the Lord, that the people of God, those that give the loud cry of the third angel's message, those that go forth, that they will be representatives as of Elijah. That we will be able to have to be holy. That we will have to be so connected with God that God can use us as a channel. I remember when John the Baptist spoke, everybody had come out. And as they came out, what did they see? They heard the voice of God from heaven speaking through this man. And they were holy. He had to be a holy, and he had to be a vessel for the indwelling of God. And that's what we have to do. We have to be brought to that point, such that the Holy Spirit can be reflected totally. If we aren't, we won't be part of the 144,000. Simple. So guess what? If you're going to be saved, you're going to have to be put to death. And it's only because of our lack of relationship with the Lord. Sometimes we're not serious. People still keep saying, oh man, they're watching TV, they got time. I say, how you got time to watch TV and we ain't even got time to study enough?
Yeah.
I mean, and the TV ain't doing nothing but brainwashing us and programming us to be less and less and desensitizing us. And I mean, it's a mess. But I mean, hey, we got to get to the point that we have to realize, man, hey, what's important? I mean, that stuff ain't important no more.
That's
But
right.
if that's still important to you, you still got a long way to go. You might be one, or you might straighten up quick. I don't know. I mean, hey, only the Holy Spirit can do it. I can't, tell you, but I'm just questioning that we have to get a little more serious with the Lord. Okay, verse 4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Now notice what's happening here. A question is asked. What is the question asked?
How long shall it be?
How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Now we're getting ready to go through it. So if they're going to answer Daniel, if they're going to answer this man's question, they're going to have to give you some time, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And the time is not going to be before the time of the end. Okay? That's number one. It ain't going to be before that time. It's going to be something that's dealing with what? The time we're talking about, the time of trouble, last day event, at the real time of the end, at the end of time. Okay? We want to make sure that we get that. Because if we don't, we're going to lose the whole thing. And we're going to spiritualize this thing and come up with a mess. Okay? But notice, okay, now he says, how long shall be the wonders of what? The time of trouble, of the time of what's actually going on. Okay? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he heard, held up his hand, his right hand, and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for what?
Times and a half.
Time, time, and a half. And what is time, time, and a half?
3.5 times.
3.5 years.
Time is 1 year. Times is 2. 1 and 2 makes 3. Half a year gives you 3.5 years. 3.5 years for what? Okay? That's what he asked. How long shall be the end of these wonders? How long? He said 3.5 years. So now that we have one time frame, and he has to explain this 3.5 years. I mean, that's not just going to work right there. Okay? And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So he's letting us know that what's going to happen during this 3.5 years? What is he saying? Now I got to start pulling out my arrows and everything else.
The end of the wonders.
All right, well, what did he say after the 3.5 years? And when he shall have accomplished to what?
Scatter the power of the holy people.
And what is the scattering of the holy people?
The saints. It would be the saints.
That's right.
God during the time of trouble, yeah.
Okay, but what time? What are we talking about? What is this time that he's going to be scattering the holy people? How do they scatter us?
Persecution.
With persecution. Okay, so we have a persecution which people don't want to realize. We're going through persecution, folks, in the last days for 3.5 years. That's a long time, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's a long time. Now, this 3.5 years wouldn't have nothing to do with the fifth seal, would it? Now you don't think Dad would be telling us something that ain't got nothing to do with the rest of these guys? Matthew 24, the fifth seal, he told us that what would happen? That they're going to kill us off just as they killed their old brethren off. But he didn't tell you how long. And for the first time he says, hey, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen at the end of time. And now he says, okay, for 3.5 years, they're going to scatter the people of God. Now we know we're talking about the time of trouble. We know we're talking about the end of time. We know we can't be talking about, thousands of years prior to that. Because he said this is the seal, the time of the end. Okay? So now we have a 3.5 year period here. Okay? Okay? With this 3.5 period of persecution. Okay? Let's read on. Let's see what else he has. Because he has a bunch of time to tell us here. Which is, I guess, we can parallel it at this point to the 1260, because that's what 3.5 years turn out to be. And I guess we can parallel what's going to be happening. Why are they going to persecute us? Because you look nice or something?
Yeah, because of the truth. Because of the stand that we're taking.
Okay. Simply due to one fact. We received the latter rain. And once we have the latter rain, then we can preach the truth. The unadulterated truth. How about that? Now, I don't want to tell you, but I can guarantee you, we ain't preaching the unadulterated truth right now.
So there'd be some persecution.
That's right. We made so many compromises, you have to find an uncompromising people. Now, I'm not saying we will be even the compromised people. We might be part of the compromise. Okay? But he's going to find a non-compromising people who will take a stand. Notice what verse 8 says. And I heard, but understood not. Then said I, O Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Then again he repeats it. He asks, well, how long, man? How long to the end of these things? And he says, wait, man, you just wait to the time of the end. Many shall be what? What does that mean? And what?
Made white.
Now how are we going to be purified and made white?
There'll be troubles. There'll be trying and tried.
Persecution is surely going to make you white. White as snow. Or gold tried in the fire. Many shall be purified and made white. And what? Tried. Tested. See, like we already know, he ain't taking sin back in. So he got to make sure that we right if we go in through the gate. He ain't taking no foolishness in. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. See, the wicked's not going to know what's going on. As we have outlined over there, there's no way the wicked can know what's going on. But somebody will know what's going on. The wise shall know and shall understand what's going on. And because they know what's going on, do you think they're going to hold their peace? That's what's going to get them in all the trouble. They say, hey man, why are you blowing the trumpet? That if I don't blow the trumpet, many people shall perish.
Why are you warning the people?
So we see that's where we're going to be. But let's read on. Let's see what else he has to say, because now he's going to get into some real particulars. And from the time that the daily, then the word sacrifice is added, so I'll skip it. And from the time that the daily shall be taken away, an abomination of desolation set up, there shall be, how long? 1,200 and how many days?
90.
And 90 days. So we got what, 1,200 and what?
60 and 1290.
We got a 1,290 day prophecy here. That it's talking about. And it's gonna have to start at the daily, when the daily is taken away. Okay? Now, I guess the question someone might ask me is, well, what is the daily and what is the abomination of desolation? Right?
Right.
How about if I tell you I don't have an answer for that?
For the daily?
No. I've heard many thoughts, many conclusions, many arguments for this and that and the other. I ain't convinced any of them right. Well, since I'm not convinced any of them right, I'm not going to try to push propaganda on you guys. I mean, it got to be clear what it is. But many people they say that they don't know neither. They're just doing guesswork. And so, I didn't really see how I could try to tell somebody else that's what it is when you couldn't find out what it is. Okay, so we have a 1290, which will put us 30 days after the 1260, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's part of it.
Oh,
1260 is part of the 1290.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Well, you don't think we're going to be going on this planet
I hope not.
for 7 years? We already got 3.5 years, and you got to repeat those 3.5 years again. You're talking about there ain't going to be no flesh around. There ain't even going to be no planet around.
Yeah, but I'm saying, if you can't establish what the daily and abomination is,
No, there's no way I can determine it.
how can you
and I don't
determine when
think,
that starts?
because it just tells you at the daily, when the daily is taken away.
Right.
And it tells you when one ends. Matter of fact, okay, well, two things. Two things. On this one here, since we know we're dealing with the persecution, which is pretty clear on this end. As the persecution goes on, the abomination of desolation is set up, and we know that the abomination that will be set up has something to do with Lucifer and his imps and his group of people, okay? And because of that, that's the only reason why I understand, or I think that time is the same time frame. Because it has to do with the last day events and it's dealing with what we're matter of fact, the both are dealing with how long before the end of these things, and it's talking about the same event. You see, if this one here is talking about clearly the persecution, then it tells you when the daily is taken away and when the abomination of desolation is set up. Now, when we read in Matthew 24, verse 15, he told us that when we see, now, in Matthew 24:15, that should help, that'll answer your question in particular. In Matthew 24:15, matter of fact, we know verses 8 through 14. Where is that? Okay, Matthew 8 through 14, supposed to be here, okay? This is what? During the what? Persecution of the believers, okay? That's what we read, okay? We can read that part again. It says, all these are the beginning of sorrow, then shall they deliver you up. Starting at verse 8 and it ends at verse 14. And it says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Then it says, when ye therefore shall see the what?
The abomination of desolation.
Spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Here it is. We already know the persecution was during this time. Then he tells us, now when you see the what? The abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And that's what that time, that's how he phrases it. Okay?
So how, again,
Okay?
I took that as being the same thing, the daily taken away and abomination of desolation set up.
Okay, well let's read what's in 15 and then we go back to Daniel. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let him that be in Judea flee, and so forth. So we know the fleeing will be, that we'll be fleeing and we'll be entering into the plague scenario. Okay? That's where this time picks up. Okay? The fleeing picks up here. We won't be fleeing. So when this picks up, it lets us know that the abomination of desolation has what? Is what kicks this off. Okay? We know that he never told us when the 1260 ended. He just lets us know that there'll be, only for 3.5 years, that they'll scatter the holy people, and that's when we'll be purified and made white. Now we go back to Daniel 12, in reference to your question, is the daily and abomination the same? And from the time, verse 11, chapter 12, that the daily shall be taken away. That's how, from one time, okay, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up. So one thing will be taken away to mark the beginning of it, and something else will be set up to mark the end of it. And then it gives us a time frame, shall be for 1,290 days, or 1,260 days. So this, I'm not sure what the daily nor what the abomination of desolation is that is set up. There's lots of theories on it. I did an exhaustive study on every place in the Bible where it deals with abomination and desolation. I mean, if y'all want a copy of it, I can give it to you. It got around that thick. Nothing but quotes. And I cannot conclude what it is. It could mean, some say that's when Satan sits in the temple of God declaring that he is God. And some say, well, that's when he goes and sits in the, when they rebuild when they rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and he goes into the most holy place and sets up himself. And then some say it's an image that they'll set up in the holy place and defile it. And there's so many theories on that. Some say that they believe it's the Sunday blue Lord. Some, you know, that's what I'm saying. I couldn't prove any of those things, as I've seen it, conclusively. Enough scripture that wouldn't contradict any other scripture to tell me exactly what that is. Now, there wasn't about, some of the things I did find was that there was, that whenever the people of God violated or constantly just disregarded what God said, God would send in certain things and destroy it, like Ezekiel. Okay? When he came in, he would, because they had set up abominations and because they had rejected God, God came in and desolated the temple at the time of Nebuchadnezzar and at the time of the Romans, because they were disobedient, the people of God. For whatever it is, and that's what brought in the desolation. It could refer to Ezekiel chapter 9. Because of the people of God have rejected him so far, that then he comes in and God allows for the to the purifying of his people. And that's when it says that we weep between the porch and the altar, and those that have the seal of God are not slain. But everyone who does not have the seal of God is slain, in Ezekiel chapter 9. But it's not still explaining what it is. And in chapter 8 tells you what a lot of the abominations were. And the last abomination was sun worship, which we know that everyone will fall in and worship eventually. Hey, you had a comment or a question?
Right, a comment. Since it says that it's taking away the daily, I was trying to think of what activity or what thing happens daily or should happen daily.
You gotta speak loud.
Okay, and the thought that I had was, the only thing that I could think of would be prayer. You know, some kind of law, maybe prohibiting prayer. That's what happened in Daniel's day. And they made a decree that no one could pray, you know, for however many days it was until, you know, it was prayer. It was something that should occur daily. And we know that they've made a big thing about prayer coming out of the schools. You know, I'm just kind of thinking that maybe it would have something to do with prayer. And if that's the case, we've already seen the beginnings of that.
Setting up a lot of stuff that's supposed to be happening. Everything is in the works, so it seems.
Well, there is also a scripture which says that to offer up the sacrifices of praise. And part of prayer is praise. So that's, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anyone else asking a thought on that?
I guess something else about that prayer, we know that even now there's a big thing about prayer at graduations. Guess you all have heard about the lawsuit or, you know.
Even saying grace in public schools now, I mean, they can't even do that. You know, kids can't pray over their food. That kind of stuff. They get suspended.
Is that right? I think it has something to do with prayer. You know, or praise,
Or even
worship.
public worship. Maybe they'll close down the churches and things like that, you know. So you won't be able to assemble together. It's a combination of a lot of things, actually.
Yep, so that's all our thoughts. That's why I said I had nothing. So good thoughts, but I didn't want to get nailed down on something that I'm speculating on. But those are good thoughts and excellent opportunity. But let's move on to the next phase of this. It talks about a 1260, 1290, and one more. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. But go thy way till the end be. For thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So he lets us know that something else has to occur. What is that? A 1335 period, is that right?
Right.
And it's going to end with the what? With the blessed day. Now, I guess the question might be, well, what in the world is the blessed day? I mean, we've been through lots of things. And now we're on the blessed day. Now that one isn't all that complicated, the blessed day.
Where you said that
What's that?
at? Blessed day.
Oh, blessed is he that waiteth. I just call it the blessed day, a day that you receive a blessing, whoever can wait until that time. I just phrased it the blessed day, or blessed day. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to that end of this time frame. Okay, we have 3 time frames here. Now, I guess the questions all have to be asked, what are all of these things mean? The blessed day, or whoever has to wait, and whoever comes to the end of the 1335 will be blessed, and I can agree with that. I have an easy answer for that one. But I guess you guys can answer it as easy as I can. When do you think, according to last day events, will be the day that will be a blessing to whoever lives to that point?
Jesus.
You better believe it. You better believe it. If not, it's coming. If not, it's coming, which I don't think it is. I don't think this is coming, but that is the gist of it. I believe that's the sign of his coming. Because when the sign comes, you know it's over. Because we don't know the day or the hour of his coming. And if we could ever figure out when the daily came, then we would be in big trouble, because we'll know the day and the hour of his coming. If we could ever figure out when the daily came. And I believe when you're going through this, you're going to know when the daily comes. You're going to know what it is. Right now we haven't arrived, and we're still quite a distance from it. But I'm sure as we progress, We're going to find out what that is. I believe this is the sign of his coming. This is the sixth seal. This is the time when no questions will be asked. That you will know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is coming. He's going to let it be known to you. And that's why the sign of his coming is soon prior to his imminent breaking through the clouds. And this is at the end of the seven seals, at the end of the seven plagues. So this one wasn't hard to define. The other two, I really don't know what they are, but I do know the time frames that they're in. And that's not complicated. We also know, okay, so now, how does this map into that? That's always the question. That's always where the questions lie. How does each chapter map into each other? Each book. Because that's an entire chapter. Chapter 12 is an entire book in Daniel. Matthew 24 is almost the entire chapter, not quite. And also seven seals, trumpets, and plagues. Those are spectacular events. Okay, how would you map them in? Well, we can map in the last one, is that right? Under the sixth seal. That one's not complicated. Because after everything is destroyed, I guess the next question you're going to be wondering, hey, when is it over? Now do you understand why Daniel asked the question, hey, when is this thing going to be over? You better believe it. After he saw what he saw, he's wondering, when is it going to be over? What's going on? How long shall it be? And what does he tell him? He gives him 3 time periods when he deals with that. Okay? So we also see, I guess, and I can understand now John, when John hears and sees what's in the book of Daniel, and sees what he just saw in the book of Revelation, and there was nobody who could explain these things, would you be weeping? That's right. Nobody could figure this out. Oh man, he was weeping and crying. He said, how in the world anybody gonna figure this out? He said, let me give you some more detail. And that's why he opened that book, so that he could explain these events. Because that's what we're talking about. The seal book, we're talking about this. This is what we're really talking about. And it picks up with the 5th seal and moves forward in time. All the way to the 6th seal. Now, I guess you might say, well, you don't have enough evidence or thoughts yet of how all of these things can map in.
5th seal, under 5th seal, under the trumpets and the plagues, because you're being purified during that time, and it's taking you all the way up to Christ's coming. Taking you up to the signs of his coming to the 6th seal, so it's still between the 5th and the 6th seal.
Right.
And then you have
So now you can figure out how long the persecution's gonna last, how long the plagues will last. Now you know what else you need to map in? That'll give you all of the dates. Well, this is the 5th seal. Because this is when you start being purified. That's what she's saying. It begins here on the 5th seal.
When the veil is taken away.
Right. Because that's when there's 160, 1290, 1330, all of them begin. And you start being purified. Okay, the persecution actually starts to begin. Now when the persecution starts to begin, it ends at a certain time. And then we know for sure that 30 days after the abomination of desolation is set up, we already know that it already marked off the plagues period. So that's why you're fleeing under the Feast of Trumpets. What you need in this scenario to clearly lock it in It's a sanctuary, the first study.
That's what I was thinking of with the daily, that
I'm
that
over
has
on
to
that.
do with the sanctuary.
You don't have to walk past here. Say that again?
So that's what I was thinking of with the daily being taken away. And that had something to do with the sanctuary because that's sanctuary terminology. Usually you think of the daily, well, with me the first thing that comes to my mind was the daily sacrifices that they did in the sanctuary. That maybe, since that's really what ties everything together, my thought on what a daily is that it has something to do with the sanctuary because our ways of Lord in the sanctuary. And once we get a full understanding of the sanctuary and how it ties into world events and what God was trying to tell us through the sanctuary, and they're persecuting us because they don't want us to get that message out. That would be like, the daily being taken away.
Okay.
What is this?
What is the first
Huh?
feast day in the fall types? The first feast day,
Blowing up the trumpet.
the blowing of the trumpet, which would relate to which event on this vast
The trumpet.
three-part series? The trumpet. That's correct. Now, when you start preaching the gospel, okay, at the blowing of the trumpet, what would be the next event that'll happen after you start preaching?
Persecution.
Persecution will start sometime after that. Persecution is marked here. And one of the feast days in persecution is guess what? It represents the purifying of the saints.
I thought we said persecution was going on until still before the blowing of trumpets.
That's what I said. I didn't agree with all you have up there. Then you see where the key falls. It changes right there. That's exactly what happened. Because you have to start preaching before they persecute you. But the general thought was there, and that was good. But when you start getting into little details like what we're trying to get into now things start making it a little clearer. Because nobody's going to persecute you because you go to church.
But what if when the New World Order is set up and you refuse to be a part of the New World Order, wouldn't that be cause for persecution?
Not really. Because you're just an individual, that's number one. And number two, you're going to follow what the church says. And the church has to get you under control. It's not the New World Order to get you under control. And as an organization, there's not going to be any organization that's going to vary from it. Every organization is part of the World Council of Churches, including Adventists.
That's right.
Right. So all of them are already part. They're the ones already making the votes. They're the ones that are saying what we're going to agree on. They already had us agree on the ministry. I think there was the ministry, I forget what the other three were. There was three of them that we already united on. Everybody. They're writing their own books of their own doctrine, that how everybody's going to believe.
Another worship,
Yeah, that's it.
ministry, I know.
Yeah, that's right.
I
On the
remember.
Eucharist, we agree that the Eucharist is right. And that the priests have the power to bring God down into making bread. Adventists believe that. Because we voted on it and we agreed with it.
You must be talking about the heads of the church.
I'm talking
They
about
filter down to the
whoever.
little people.
I'm talking, that had nothing to do with little people. Little people don't run the church. This is a
That's what I'm
business.
saying. Yeah, you're talking about
So
the
we're
heads.
talking about a business. And when you are registered as a business and they tell you, you say that I'm so-and-so, they say, well, so what? That ain't got nothing to do with you. You're in this business. This is what the business says. And this is what the church as an organization, but not just Adventists, we're talking about all the churches agree to this. Baptist, Methodist, everybody who's part of the World Council of Churches. They have already agreed to a lot of these things. The ministry of what they consider a minister. And obviously us, the laymen, are not the ministry. All right? So when things start rolling and we start preaching and they say, wait, aren't these your people? They say, yeah. Well, you better get them under control. And they say, well, hey, brother, Keith, you can't be preaching, you gotta have a license. You gotta go to our ordained colleges and, get the degree, and then we give you, and then after you get the degree, we still don't, say that you can preach, or you a preacher. You gotta be ordained by us. God can't ordain you, like he did the apostles, or like he did Brother White and all the other people and all the Waldenses. You don't have that gift. So you don't cooperate, they can just throw you out. You don't think that no churches is going to be upset because one or two fanatics, as they call them, are going to, you know, preach some fanatical doctrine that says everybody's going to hell because we received the Lucifer initiation. And you know, so that's what I'm saying. So they already agreed that they can bring down God from heaven and put him in a, that's already been signed, sealed, and delivered. We already gave him the gold medallion.
Yeah, that
Pope. So I mean, hey, if you think that somebody's gonna stand up for you, you think it all wrong. So that's gonna stand up for you, you're gonna bow to them. So my point was, in here, okay, as we're looking at that, now you can see the trumpets have to come first. You have to start preaching, because the only reason why you preach is because you receive the latter rain, because you receive the power from God. And as you go forth with the power of God, okay, and as you go forth with the power of God, then the persecution begins. Now, when will that? What other event or what other feast day represents the purifying and made white of the saints?
Day of Atonement.
The Day of Atonement
Not really a feast.
it's a feast day, but it marks off the time when sin ceases. I'm talking about another time because we're talking about the time prior, something that's going to purify you. The Day of Atonement doesn't purify you. The Day of Atonement says, okay, this is it, no more. We're cutting you off. You're either pure or you're not. So there's another time before the Day of Atonement of a feast day that will purify you.
Unleavened bread.
The Feast of Unleavened Bread. All sin will be removed out of your life. Now, remember I told you something before. I told you that between...
That's the unleavened bread, wasn't that the spring season?
Right, but it was never fulfilled because we never had a perfected people. That was the only difference. If you look at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, what month? If you look at the Feast of Trumpets, that's where we start. Because you start preaching the gospel. But let me change this around now that you guys can see the light. Okay, we get the 7 trumpets going here. Okay, so the 7 trumpets is after the 4th seal. Then, the 5th seal begins. They persecute you because of what you have to say. They don't persecute you, as some teach, because you belong to a certain affiliation. That's not quite true. Okay, so when you start preaching the gospel, if you start preaching the gospel on the 7th month, the 15th day of the 7th month, okay, that's when you start preaching. Preaching now, that's what we're talking about. As you start preaching the gospel, now, I mentioned to you, and this represents the Feast of Unleavened Bread, okay? So how much of a time frame between they start persecuting you and this picks up? I do want to make a minor correction here. The way this thing works is that you're being persecuted during the trumpets. Even though the trumpets started first, and you're being persecuted a little time after that. At least 6 months, according to my calculation. Because if this starts on the 7th month, first 15th day, and the purifying of the saints cannot start until the 1st month, 6 months later on the 15th day, that gives you exactly a half a year. In that half a year, as I understood it, it only makes sense that by the time you start preaching the gospel and they start realizing what you're doing, that you are not cooperating. You are, you know, I mean, you are fighting against the entire system. And then people will come over and talk to you and all that, and these other people, and then they realize that, you know, you don't have, I mean, that don't mean anything. Your threats are idle threats. Then they say, fine, okay, no problem. Let's show him what type of power he's dealing with. And then they start enacting laws. Remember, it says that we'll be preaching the gospel, and then they will what? Enact laws to what? To keep us from what? Preaching. And then that'll be, as I seen it, at least 6 months, at least 30 days. I mean, at least 6 months. Because if this doesn't begin until the 1st month, this begins the 7th month, you have a half a year to preach the gospel without being persecuted. But after that, now the persecution starts on the heat. Now the heat starts. They start putting the heat on you. And they start persecuting you and start killing off the people of God. No question about that. Now, when they start preaching and they start killing off the people of God, if that starts here, we talk about what, 3.5 years, is that right? Now, when will it end? Now y'all can answer that. When will the persecution end? What month and what day? Yeah. Y'all got all the documentation. That's right.
Okay, you told us when it started. When did it start again?
We talking about after the trumpet, right?
First day of the seventh, no.
Persecution don't start until when? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay? The first month, 15th day. 15th through the 21st. Somewhere in between there. It starts. Kicks off. You're starting to be purified because you're being persecuted.
Okay.
But 6 months before that, you done started preaching. 6 months you didn't have to worry about persecution. Now the persecution starts. Now it says, now will many be offended. See, they wasn't offended when they were going out preaching. Oh yeah, man, we had good times, man. We talked about the beast, bro. Now they start coming down on you. Wait a minute. Then he said, now many are offended. And then what do? They start betraying one another. Now who's going to betray you? Catholics know what you're teaching? No. Who knows what you're teaching? Thank you. Now who going to deliver you up? Who going to deliver you up?
Your brethren.
Thank you. It didn't say that the Catholics coming in and going to deliver you up. It didn't say that the world was coming in and delivering you up. He says what? Those who I spent all my time in the house of prayer, the brethren who I spent the time, they're going to what? They're going to deliver you up. Matter of fact, he says that you're going to be brought to the Sanhedrin or brought to the synagogue and be scourged in there. So the church, that before the board meeting, they're going to take you in and they're going to deal with you first. Then when they get finished saying that, hey, you ain't preaching what we say, they don't know what you're supposed to be preaching. They take the whole group of you and bring you to the what? To the court. And then that's when you have to stand and stand in a court and before the legislature. See, I tell you, all that stuff starts pulling together with what has been written. It's clear. And it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. It doesn't, it makes perfect sense. And that's why he gives you the time frame. So that when this starts on the first month, the 15th through the 21st day, one of those days it starts on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 3.5 years later, when will it end?
15th, or the 7th month, the 15th to the 21st day.
That's right. He would have to end on what? The blowing of trumpets. Of course it would end on the blowing of trumpets. Because when the persecution ends, it ends because you what? You done stop blowing the trumpets. The trumpets, when you stop blowing the trumpets, we know that the Day of Atonement, what?
It's in.
It's right here, ready to what? To be done away with. Because 9 days later is when the Day of Atonement occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Your 3.5 years is up. I mean, on the Feast of, not the blowing of trumpets, sorry, on the Feast of Tabernacles is on what? The 7th month, the 15th day. Remember I told y'all before, there was exactly a 30-day, a half a year between two feast days, the purifying of the saints, and guess what? The beginning of the falling of the plague.
Say that again.
Okay? On the first month, on the 15th to the 21st day is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When you go 3.5 years, you come back to a half a year after that started, which is the 7th month, the 15th day through the 21st day, somewhere in between those 7 days. And that gives you the Feast of Tabernacle. The Feast of Tabernacle is what? It's the time we're supposed to be what? Fleeing. Is that right? That's the time of the plague, the time of the Great Tribulation. So right here is when the persecution has ended. Okay? And we know 5 days prior to that, the Day of Atonement occurs and Christ had left the heavenly sanctuary. See, without that, you can't figure out any of this stuff. Now, the other question is, what is this extra 1290? What is the abomination of desolation? When will that end? That's a very simple one. 30 days beyond the Feast of Tabernacles is what? The 8th month, the 15th day of the 8th month. That's real simple. If it started on the 15th day of the 7th month, the Feast of Tabernacles, 30 days beyond is what? The 8th month, the 15th day.
I'm trying to figure out what that significance of that month and day is.
Oh, I'm gonna give that to you right now. Now turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 12, and you will find something very astonishing. You want to see an abomination set up? An abomination is set up on that day. That's the only reason why I said that this is the way it's going to happen, because everything just maps. And I say, man, this is really deep. Okay,
1 Kings chapter 12, verse what?
we're going to start at verse 26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Now this was when Solomon died, and the kingdom was divided. Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, and Jeroboam, God gave 10 kingdoms to. Okay? And now this is Jeroboam talking. Verse 28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made what? 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy God, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went up to worship before the one even unto Dan. And he made an house of the high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast. When?
The 8th month.
Month on the 15th day.
There it is, exactly to the left. On the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. Now notice, what did he do? He set up the first counterfeit holy day, which is being practiced all over the planet. Everyone has their false holy days. Okay, and Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar, so did he in Bethel, sacrifices unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. And he offered upon the altar and burnt incense. So there it is. He lets us know that exactly 30 days later, he had set up his own first counterfeit false feast day, which will be in parallel with the abomination of desolation, when it would be set up. That Satan would work in parallel with himself. The first false holiday, he would set up his last false holiday for everyone to worship. And we will see who will come up to worship of what Jeroboam has spoken. Then we find out that 45 days later, now this is during the time of the plagues. And then 45 days later, because that's what we're talking about a period of 75 days from the persecution ending until the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. 30 days to the abomination of desolation, and 45 days beyond that. So my understanding is, when this hits, at this point, when the persecution ends, that that's going to be at the end of, at the beginning